Hey YouTube, Kiritwig here, bringing you all an update to my Performapal Yu-Gi-Oh! Deck profile for post-Battles of Legend Monstrous Revenge. We got the new Karibo pendulums to work with the Performapal deck. These were cards that were used by Yugioh in the manga, along with a couple of the other Odd Eyes Butler cards that we got as well. I wouldn't say they're the most competitive cards. This is more for a fun version of the Performapal deck, being able to utilize all the many different, I would say, entertaining card effects that these cards are meant to do. Just special summoning themselves out and then just giving you more search power for the cards as well. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started with the deck profile. So for the new Performapal cards, we are running 3 copies of Performapal Barrow Karibo. So with this card, like I said, this is going to be a fun deck. So with Barrow Karibo, once per turn in the pendulum scale at the start of the battle phase, you can add one monster with 300 attack and 200 defense from your deck to your hand, then destroy this card. So this card even has the potential to be run in a Karibo deck, since it can just search out Karibo or Wing Karibo or any of the Karibo cards to begin with and then destroying itself. But the main search that you'll use for this card is to search out your Performapal Classic Karibo for a 300 attack, 200 search, which is also a pendulum monster that you can set up with its high scale. And when your monster is destroyed by battle, you can special summon this card from your hand. Your opponent's monsters cannot target monsters for attack except for this one, and if this card is attacked, change it to attack position at the end of damage step. So it does have 3000 defense, meaning that your opponent may take some big damage with this card, so they either swing over it or they'll hit some damage, and then your Karibo will switch into attack position. So then you will have the destruction phase here, but with this you're going off of the destruction of one of your cards and then special summoning out the Barrow Karibo, and then your opponent having to attack into this card, then having that final attack to get over it to begin with also. We're also running 2 copies of the new Performapal Classic Karibo. Now, I don't run 2 copies of this because it is searchable off of Barrow Karibo. And when an opponent's monster declares a direct attack, this card is destroyed. And if this card is destroyed by its own pendulum effect, you end the battle phase. You can use each of the following effects of Performapal Classic Karibo once per turn. You can discard this card and then target one card in your pendulum zone. Its pendulum scale becomes 1 until the end of this turn. And when you take battle damage while this card's in your graveyard, you can place this card in your pendulum zone. So it lets you change the pendulum scale to one of your other cards, and then setting it in this scale so you could set up your 1 through 8 scale to pendulum summon out a bunch of other different cards. Like I said, this is a very entertaining and fun deck. There's really no meta relevancy to playing these Performapal cards. They really just add a different take on the playstyle to have a lot of different plays where they involve the graveyard, your pendulum scales, your monsters on the field, using these different Karibo variants for your Performapal monsters. And we're running 1 copy of Odd Eyes Valet and 1 copy of Odd Eyes Butler. I may not even run these in future builds just because they really are specific for their play styles. You have a level adjustment play with your Odd Eyes Valet, and then with Odd Eyes Butler, when it declares an attack, you can add 1 Odd Eyes Pendulum monster from your graveyard to the extra deck face up. So it helps for some recycle power with cards, let's say like Performapal Lady Ange for the discard setup of some of your other cards in the graveyard to then just add back to the extra deck. For some of the other 3-ofs that we run for the Performapal monsters, 3 copies of the Performapal Odd Eyes Seer. This card came out in the last Battles of Legend, but still a very useful card in the deck. You can target 1 Performapal or Odd Eyes card in your graveyard, add it to your hand, then destroy this card. So you even get search power with some of the other cards sent to the graveyard to use over Odd Eyes Butler. And then during the main phase, if you control this pendulum summon card, you can activate the following based on its battle position. Attack, you can banish this card to target a Performapal Odd Eyes in your graveyard, special summon it. And defense, take 1 Performapal Odd Eyes Pendulum from your deck and either add to your face up extra deck or send it to the graveyard. So more recycle power for your Performapal Odd Eyes monsters from your deck to then be able to resummon back out onto the field also. I also run the 3 copies of Performapal Lady Ange. With this card, once per turn, when an attack is declared involving your monster and an opponent's monster, you can discard 1 pendulum monster. That monster loses 1000 attack till the end of turn. So more graveyard setup for Odd Eyes Seer, as I said before. And you can discard this card and 1 Performapal monster except for Performapal Lady Ange to draw 2 cards, and if this card's in your graveyard, you control an Odd Eyes card in your pendulum Zone or Performapal Gentrude. You can place this card in your Pendulum Zone, setting up your perfect scale when you have your other Scale 8 Gentrude to use to complete the scale with this card. For the other 3-ups, we also run 3 copies of Performapal Skullcrobat Joker. More search power. Just being able to have access to any of your Performapal monsters means you can even just search out your Barrel Karibo off of the Skullcrobat Joker play, and then the Pendulum set to enter the battle phase, destroying this card and adding your other Performapal Classic Karibo off of that search also, and setting up more of the deck thinning because of it. We also run the 2 for the 3-ups, the 3 Pendulum Sorcerer, having the Destruction play, getting around the use of your scale setup with your Barrel Karibo and your Classic Karibo to then give you more of a monster search, whatever you may need for your Pendulum Scales. If it's the Lady Ange or the Odd Eye Seer, you have that search power thanks to your Pendulum Sorcerer. And for the last of the 3-ups, I run 3 copies of Performapal Second Donkey. This might even be, dropped to 2, so I could run a 3rd copy of the next card that I run in the deck. But with Second Donkey, when it's normal or special summon, you can send 1 Performapal monster from your deck to the graveyard, except for Performapal Second Donkey. So if you have 2 cards in your Pendulum Zone, you can add to your hand instead. So you can even just use your Second Donkey to send Lady Ange to the graveyard if you have your Gentrude that can complete your Pendulum Scale with just using this 1 monster that you normal summoned out. With our other option for the 3-up, like I said, you could drop the Second Donkeys down to 2 and put in a 3rd copy of Performapal Gentrude, but I also dropped the number of Gentrude because we were running some of the other newer Performapals in the deck also. So you could always increase Gentrude by taking out either the Odd Eyes Valet or the Odd Eyes Butler for a 3rd copy of this card, giving you the Pendulum setup with Lady Ange. And if you Performapal Lady Ange is in your other Pendulum Zone and you control no monsters or only Pendulum monsters, you can add 1 Odd Eyes card from your deck to your hand. So you have plenty of other Odd Eyes monsters to run and search for with this card as well, and that play. Some of them being the 1-ofs that we're using, like our Performapal Odd Eyes Minotaurus, and also the Odd Eyes Pendulum Graft Dragon, the 1 ritual monster we run in the deck that can also just be summoned out onto the field through a Pendulum Summon, the 1 Performapal Daggerman, so we can go for our Brave Eyes Pendulum Dragon Summon, the 1 Git Turtle, and the 1 Monkey Board for more draw power and additional search power. And for the last of the 1-ofs, the 1 copy of Performapal Odd Eyes Unicorn, 1 Yugioh Golem, and the 1 Performapal Trump Witch for the Polymerization Search, or just the Pendulum Scale Fusion Summon that you can do with it also. And that is it for the main deck monsters. Pendulum Summoning is a big part of the deck. That's why the majority of our cards in the main deck are monsters to begin with. But for the spells that we do run, 3 copies of Performapal Popper Up. You send up to 3 cards from your hand to the graveyard and draw that many cards. Then you can special summon up to that many monsters from your hand with different card names that are Performapal monsters, Magician Pendulum monsters, and or Odd Eyes monsters, with each a level between the Pendulum Scales of 2 cards in your Pendulum Zone. So with the cards you sent and the cards you draw, as long as you have a perfect scale set up on the field for you to use, you can summon those monsters and not have to take any life point loss from this spell also. And also the 2 copies of Duelist Alliance, adding a Pendulum Monster or Pendulum Spell or Trap. So you can add your Pendulum Sorcerer, your Pendulum Graft Dragon, or even one of our other 1-ofs that we run in the deck, with the Polymerization being one of the fusion cards we run to use with Trump Witch, the 1 Pendulum Fusion, another fusion option, using monsters we control as fusion materials. If you have 2 cards in your Pendulum Zone, you can also use cards in your Pendulum Zones as fusion material, and the 1 extra Pendulum, giving an additional Pendulum summon during your main phase, and then also being able to search the extra Pendulum, since it does have Pendulum in its name, off of our Duelist Alliance spell. No traps in the deck. Our main focus is the use of Pendulum Summoning, so traps would just slow down the play style. So moving on now to the extra deck, 2 copies of Performapal Odd Eyes Metal Claw, needing 1 Odd Eyes monster and 1 Performapal monster, so very easy to summon in the deck. If you use Polymerization, it's unaffected by other card effects, which we do run in the deck. It's just another easy way to summon out this monster. The 1 Gatling Ghoul for the other additional destruction plays, just needing a Performapal and a level 5 or higher Dark Monster, which you can even use the setup with our Barrel Karibo to summon out this card onto the field for this card. And then also the 1 Brave Eyes Pendulum Dragon, the 1 Petitie Coverture, the 1 Odd Eyes Vortex Dragon, and the 1 Starving Venom Fusion Dragon for the rest of the fusions that we run in the deck. And for the Xyz monsters, 1 Dark Rebellion Xyz Dragon, 1 Baguska, the 1 Norito, the Morale Leader. Now this I can summon out a good number of times when I pendulum summon 2 Odd Eyes Seers onto the field and then just overlay the 2 of them together, with the last of our Xyz monsters being the 1 copy of Divine Arsenal Zeus to overlay on any of the Xyz monsters that we may use also in the deck. With our Link monsters being the only ones we run in the deck, 2 copies of Beyond the Pendulum for more of the Pendulum Search power for just the cost of 1,500 life points, 1 Zephyra Metaltron to give us more arrows for pendulum summoning as well from the extra deck, and the 1 Apollosa with the many different monsters that we summon out in this deck. Being able to get out a monster effect negation card always does come in handy against our opponents. As for some of the go-to plays in the deck, as I said before, this is just more of a fun setup that you can use with your different Performapal Karibo cards. So if you have the Barrow Karibo, or you go for the Search of it, whether it be off of your second donkey or your Skullcrabat, or even the Pendulum Summon of your Pendulum Sorcerer, you can get the Destruction play, have your Barrow Karibo set up for the battle phase, adding monsters with 300 attack and 200 defense from your deck to your hand. So you can add the Classy Karibo off of the Search, destroying this card, which will set it up in your Pendulum Zone, but then you have the set scale for your Performapal Classy Karibo being a higher scale monster. It can also work with some of the lower scales you may set up in the deck also. Now, sadly, the Barrow Karibo is a level 8, so we can't Pendulum Summon it as easily back onto the field, but with the setup we have, we do have the summon of additional monsters that we may have in our hand with the ones that we run in the deck, and then just having the Destruction play with this card when it's destroyed when your opponent declares a direct attack. So even if you don't have that setup, you can just go for the setup of your Classy Karibo when your opponent declares that direct attack, destroying this card and ending the battle phase, giving you an additional search on the following turn to perform another Pendulum Summon. Like I said, these cards add more of a fun play style to the deck. It doesn't really add any meta relevancy, but the fun comes down to just being able all to do the different shenanigans with these different Performapal monsters. But that is it for the deck profile. I hope you all enjoyed, and as always, until next time, please don't forget to leave a like and subscribe, and Kira Twig out.